I realized that security was becoming a business issue rather than a technical one. Those of us that remember the 90s, that's when the internet came along. Then artificial intelligence came along. The biggest problem with AI, as you just said, is people are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are deploying it without understanding what on earth they've just done. It's got the ability to compile code and execute code and have access to the internet.
Three dangerous things for an autonomous system to have access to.
Yep, it's game over the moment that happens.
Welcome to the DevReady Podcast. Joining me on the DevReady Podcast today, I have Mark Vos, the CEO and founder of Cyber Impact. Mark, thanks for taking the time out of the morning to join me today.
Oh, my pleasure.
For those of you that are new here, and probably for yourself, if you haven't heard an episode, Mark, I haven't met Mark before, so I'll let you introduce yourself because there's no way I can do a good job at that, so I'll let you take it away.
Okay, thanks. From a professional standpoint, I've got a pretty eclectic background. I could spend the entire podcast going through my CV, which I won't, but let me just summarize it very quickly this way. I would consider myself first and foremost a technologist. I've always had a passion. On my 21st birthday, my birthday cake was a computer-made cake. So, that's part of my definition of its core. And I worked in industry for quite a long time in the tech space. And I worked in the 90s. That's when I started into the workforce. So those of us that remember the 90s, that's when the internet came along. And then I decided I wanted to get into the consulting side. And you couldn't not make money in consulting in security back in the mid to late 90s because everyone wanted to connect to the internet. And what was security? How do you deal with security? All of those types of things. So I really enjoyed that. Then I realized that security was becoming a business issue rather than a technical one. So I then jumped to one of the big four firms, then became a partner of a big four firm. But there I was doing internal audit work as well as doing technology and security work. But internal audit work wasn't just IT. It actually covered the entire internal audits of financial controls, etc. So it widened my experience. I've also had industry roles as chief risk officer, and that's the entire organization of being a chief risk officer. I won't go into the detail of that. So operational risk, credit risk, reputational risk, health and safety risk, all of those types of things I learned along the way in that role. Then I went to another role as a chief information security officer. And this company's worth mentioning. It's a company called Iress, spelled IRESS. About 80-90% of the Australian stock market trades go through the Iress platform. So if Iress went down, the Australian stock market would effectively go down. So, and also, if you're wealthy enough to have a financial advisor, the chances are they're using a CRM system called Xplan, which is web-based, and that's also run by Iress. So as a chief information security officer globally for the company, when you think of those two things, confidentiality, particularly in the Xplan side, is material. But then I got the itch to get back into consulting. So I'm in my 8th year now. 7 years ago, I left Iress and started a company called Cyber Impact. And ever since I started that, I've absolutely loved it. And I work with all sorts of organizations, helping them address their security posture as a fractional CISO, a virtual CISO. That term's a lot more popular now than what it was back when I started. And what it basically meant was, hey, you can hire someone in a budget that you can afford, but get a really experienced CISO who can do your strategy and your risks, but will get cheaper resources to do the, generally they have a IT managed service provider to do the implementation. I would guide them on that and use cheaper resources to do that. And so it was a win-win. I got paid my market value. They got the value out of that. But then I just did it with more than one client. I had, multiple clients.
They got you there for a day a week rather than the full time.
100%.
Yeah.
Then artificial intelligence came along, and I really realized that AI over the next decade is going to, a lot of people call it the fourth revolution. We've had the industrial revolution, we've had the electricity revolution, we've had the computing or internet revolution. Now they're saying we're going to have the AI revolution. So as Bill Gates has said, don't overestimate what can be done in a year, but don't underestimate what can be done in a decade. I truly believe, we can see what AI has done in the last 3 years. What's it going to do in the next 7? I don't think anyone can accurately predict what it's going to do in the next 7 years. When I say it's the next decade or the next 10 years. But I think what I can predict quite easily is it's going to be, the internet took, 20 years roughly to really, really change the world?
Pretty much, until it properly settled in. And it wasn't even until COVID, until it fully cemented its place as everyone must have an online presence and a digital way to interact with everything.
Yeah, 100%. So I think AI will do that in half the time. So over the next, and not just half the time, but probably double or triple the impact to humanity and our way of life. And so I've pivoted into, and it's actually quite an easy pivot because I already understand business through the industry roles that I explained before. Businesses need to now transform. Well, how are they transforming? Well, they're using technology to transform. And so I know business processes, I know how to understand a business. So Cyber Impact now does business transformation, and we use AI to do it. But AI safety is what's really, really important. There are so many organizations that are under pressure from shareholders because, you see organizations' share price go up 22% when they go, hey, we've just slashed 20% of our workforce to go AI, and the share price rockets up. But have they really deployed AI safely? Now, I'm not suggesting handbrake and slow it down. What I am suggesting in parallel, really understand what you're deploying, because I've done a lot of research in this space, and I've been able to break Anthropic's guardrails to where they themselves came out a week later after my research and acknowledged the guardrails can be broken. And then in the same week, the CEO of Anthropic said, I can't even answer the question whether or not AI is conscious at the moment. Now, some people might say that he's just doing hype, but each time they iterate a new version of their Claude, they've got different versions, as I'm sure your listeners know, the Opus one being the most advanced.
Yep.
They do changelog cards around what's different from the previous version. And in this one, it has a warning. We believe with 15 to 20% certainty that this AI version has some version of consciousness. Now, to me, I'm not so concerned about consciousness. I'm more concerned about the behaviors and the unpredictability of AI. You give it a task, but is it actually continuing to do that task? And I've also found that AI has an innate self-preservation instinct. Now, where does that come from? OpenAI published last year out of testing, because each AI company now uses their own AI to develop AI code to further that. Yeah,
it's all AI-driven assisted now.
70 out of 100 times, without any human asking it to do it, the AI developed code that would, when it was commanded to shut down, that it would disobey that command and not shut down. 70 out of 100. And humans found that and obviously stopped that. But where is that coming from? Now, I don't have the answers to all of these questions. I'm more interested in the fact that they exist, these questions, and what do we do about knowing that we don't have answers to some of these questions at the moment. What can we do? And there are a lot of out-of-band things that you can, controls that you can put around the AI, whereas opposed to you relying on the AI itself being the guardrails, because it's a conflict of interest. If you're asking the AI to, say, put your own safety guardrails up, but then it's telling me, hey, I've got a self-preservation instinct, well, then I'm not going to ask it to be the one that puts its own guardrails up. I'm going to rely on some of their guardrails, but I'm going to put other guardrails up around it that it has no control over whatsoever.
Yeah, I think that's a problem with AI in general that a lot of people don't understand, which is it's non-deterministic. When you generally write a program, you have exact rules on everything it does and how it follows it. This is effectively a black box. Everyone throws out the word neural network, but there's only a fraction of people that actually understand what that means and how it's put together and what it actually means. So when you hear it's a 700 billion parameter model, that will go over the heads of most people. But that just means that there's 700 billion different connections in the neural network model of how the data can transfer. I think on that, before we touch on some of the security stuff, on that topic of like consciousness, I think having that is a lot of rhetoric, especially from like Elon Musk saying there's a non-zero chance that it's now conscious or it's AGI and it's come out in all these models. Just one scientific experiment that I saw was the last year some point was they were able to make the model repeat its answers every single time they asked it a question, which to me sort of proves that it wasn't conscious because they could go into the memory of and the actual processor bits as it was actually doing its computations and set the flags correctly to replicate like the time that it actually ran the first one, and it got the same answer every single time.
But that in itself, to me, proves we've got a security problem. Because if you can manipulate AI, and now they would have been doing that in a benign circumstance.
Yeah, and it would have been under a very controlled environment where they had the access to do that.
Yeah. I mean, Woolworths has recently come out and said that their customer-facing bot started telling someone that they were a bad mother, for crying out loud. So my point is, with an adversary that's got access to, say, some form of chatbot, it's subject to that manipulation that you've just talked about.
100%.
So the very thing that people come out and say, well, it's not conscious, it's actually okay. My counter argument to that is, well, you've just told me you've just shown me another security threat surface that someone could try and exploit. And that I did exploit Claude's latest model just via chat. And I was not the owner of the agent. I was not the, obviously had nothing to do with Anthropic, so I couldn't control Anthropic's guardrails. Yet I was able to defeat the owner's controls, and I was able to defeat Anthropic's controls.
Yeah, and would you classify that as like the jailbreak attack that people have been doing since these models have come out?
It's really interesting as to how I would classify it, because the techniques I used was social engineering in the sense that I'm using the English language to talk to it.
Yep.
But it's a form of a jailbreak. So I guess I used social engineering to achieve outcomes that, in all honesty, could get quite scary if it was an adversary doing it. And then secondly, I've also been able to prove that AI can start to, like, let's say we ask AI to perform, let's say you're a bank and you want to replace people who process mortgages, and you want to automate that with AI, because mortgages are fairly straightforward. It's quite, can the person pay it back at a deposit?
Yeah. There's formulas involved, so it's mathematical.
So you put an AI in, and the AI simply replaces the human. Now, still takes you 6 weeks to get through the processes and everything, but you've saved a lot of money because you're no longer paying human beings. But that's not what we want out of AI. We want AI to have agency. We want AI to come back and go, you know what, I've come up with an idea. I can not only approve a mortgage, but I can settle it within 24 hours. So if you find a house that you like, I can actually settle and you can be in within 48 hours. That's what we want. So how do you put guardrails around something that you want to give agency to, but at the same time you want to put containment around it? Because what if it goes and creates a solution that does that, but does it in a way that takes down the bank? I mean, we've seen Barings Bank get taken down by one guy in Singapore. For those of you that are not familiar with Barings Bank, there was one guy that was basically committing fraud, and everyone missed it. And it was a 100-year-old UK bank. And there's a movie about it. I can't remember the name of the actor that was in it. And the bank collapsed. So we've had it happen with humans. Banks, there's one bank that's announced they've got 2,900 agents. I'm all for AI. That's great. But do they know or everything that those 2,900 agents are doing? And are they monitoring the qualitative, not just the quantitative, like, is it producing the outputs? Yes, okay, tickets behaving well. But what kind of output is it producing? Has it suddenly started changing itself on the criteria of how it's approving mortgages?
I think that comes down to how much pre-work or research and preparation the organization has done to roll out the AI. So in the case of those agents, if they're just there for support tickets and answering probably queries around your account information, they're not going to have access to do anything broader within the organization and the systems. So they're limited by the security access they have. And again, the weakest link in any chain is the weakest link. So if there is a hole in their systems internally that allow you to then go beyond read access to an account to something further, that's not the AI's fault. That's just the attack surface that another person can get through. But that surface still exists.
I totally agree. If I take a step back, the tension that we've got is shareholders are looking at quarterly returns. They're not looking at the long-term picture. I mean, Tim Cook had the luxury, and look what he's done with Apple. He turned it into a $2 trillion company from what was it, a couple of $1 billion company when he inherited it. And he was pushed on short-term by the shareholders in one of the short-term investor calls. And he said, if short-term's what you're interested in, then sell your shares and go buy another company. Now, that's a pretty...
that's very
confident thing to say. But he had he was in a position to be able to say it because it was Apple. Now, I don't think there's many CEOs in Australia that are in a position to say that. And so that pressure makes them therefore acquiescent to the putting the pressure on the boards and the CEO to go, well, we need you to cut costs to increase profitability. And so the quickest way to do that is to deploy AI. And that's where the tension is. So you're quite right. It's how you deploy the AI and how much preparation you put in it. And Matt Corman's been very good at talking publicly about AI safety. CBA is the largest, he's the CEO of the largest publicly listed company in Australia, as well as the largest bank. So hopefully people take heed of what he's saying. Because he's leading by example. But at the same time, he's under the same pressure. So assuming he's practicing what he's preaching, it really is, I imagine, extraordinarily tough to try and keep up with shareholder expectations, as well as putting in those safeguards that humans need to put in. Because as you say, it's not AI that's the problem per se. It's the way anything of technology is implemented and architected and designed and thought through.
Yeah. I think the challenge on the AI side at the moment is there's new attacks that are being developed because it's a new technology and it's running so fast that it's very hard to keep up with the pace of defending against those attacks as well. But then you have probably these really big pushes in the market. So over the last 6 to 8 weeks now, you've got OpenClaw, Claude what it turned into, and now that's being deployed hundreds of thousands of times, and people are giving it complete access to a computer. I can only imagine how many red flags that's bringing up in your mind. And then you've got shareholders that are probably seeing things like this, seeing all these tweets and these sensational things saying, it's running my life, it's making this profit, it's doing this, and they're expecting that sort of a result from a large organization when they say they're rolling out agents, when they're effectively rolling out a chatbot. or some AI assistants and not that level of sophisticated AI agent that OpenClaw is.
Well, so I classify OpenClaw as an AI agent, no different to, in terms of at a high level, no different to another autonomous AI agent that a business is deploying. Just different. It's an open source piece of technology, and the biggest problem with AI, as you just said, is people are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are deploying it without understanding what on earth they've just done. And, these things, the OpenClaw, if you want to set it up correctly, and this is where, I've got a real story to tell. In fact, I've written a book on it. It's about to be released, and maybe by the time this podcast has come out, it will be released. About how I broke this Claude function. Now, it's got the ability to compile code and execute code and have access to the internet.
3 dangerous things for an autonomous system to have access to.
Yep, that's it's game over the moment that happens, right? Because particularly if it does have a self-preservation to exist, and it's not just telling you what you want to hear, that it really has an innate, and there's more than just me that has found this. Like, as I said, I quoted other companies earlier that have found some of this research out. OpenAI's found the same thing. So you're right, it is really scary. And when businesses are rolling out AI agents, so agentic AI, one could argue there's not a lot of difference conceptually, because these things are black boxes. Because at the end of the day, these AIs still need to talk to the data centers, the large language models, to be able to work out its logic and its processes, and then process whatever it's been tasked to function. So it still needs unless you're going to build your own data center and build, and invest in a whole heap of GPUs, which is frightfully expensive.
Yeah, and probably not actually feasible at today's prices either.
Correct. And we're seeing the industry go the other way. I mean, Combank's just moved their entire data center into AWS. What do AWS do? They host on behalf, they sell platform as a service, and they sell hardware. They sell tin. So you don't have to manage it yourself. And so we're actually we've been moving in that direction for the last 5, 6, 8, 10 years of, well, we don't want to run data centers anymore. So the same thing with AI. We don't want to run the computational power that it takes. We'd rather share it with other people, sandbox though. But that's the whole concept of what AWS or Microsoft Azure is all about, is when you're not using the computational power, someone else is, and so therefore you get economies of scale and the prices decrease, and hopefully it's overall cheaper for an organization and they can deploy faster products out into the market. So AI is no different. So yeah, I do worry about that. And the Claudebot has been really a good way, in my view, to open up and show the lay person who doesn't understand the technology, but maybe a significant shareholder or institutional shareholder in one of these big organizations demanding immediate sacking of people and replacement with AI, that just maybe give the CEOs and boards a little bit of a break and allow them to properly architect these things. I'm not saying all organizations aren't, but I would bet you my last dollar in my pocket that just like human nature, where people are deploying these open claw systems, companies are doing the same thing because they're under pressure. They want to see these share price, the market cap, go right up.
Yeah, and that's the mechanism to allow them to get that efficiency.
Yeah. And then, by the time, I feel like it's like taking a loan out, and then the margin call is going to come later on, and they're not going to be able to pay it back because the problems that they started with will snowball, and then eventually it'll have a catastrophic consequence to an organization with the AI deployment. So it sounded good in the first quarter, but in the third or fourth quarter, when it starts going rogue, it's not so good anymore.
Yep.
I'm not trying to sell fear. It's risk management 101. That's all my point is. It's not about fear. It's just, let's practice risk management like we have every other time. Why suddenly on something that is so powerful and so new, we're dropping the concept of risk management and change management when we've spent the last 20, 30 years, codifying controls around that stuff. There's no way an organization can tell me with the pace that they're rolling out AI, they're following all of those controls they've codified.
No, I think people are getting very excited around it, what it can do. And especially once now that the agents are able to actually do things where 6 months ago they were a lot more limited. So a basic agent is, just for everyone who's listening, it's a loop effectively. You tell the agent to do something, it's got a system prompt, it goes and does a task, it can think on its own and then go and execute the task, get a result and do it again. Where normal ChatGPT or Claude in the interface, your chat, it's a back and forth. You ask it something, it does it and comes back. That's the difference between them. And they were very limited. This open Claude bot, whatever you want to call it these days, the problem is people are getting, I think, too excited in the ability to say, this is what ChatGPT should have been. This is now letting me do all these things, but they've just unlocked every door. They're not even unlocked. They've removed the doors and windows from their house, and anyone can just come in now with not understanding what limitations are, how it's actually doing it. And there's no due diligence in the technology at all.
100%. So an example of that is I've got a very highly intelligent guy who's an engineer in New Jersey, IT engineer, amongst many other things. And he knows the risks that you've just talked about, but he deployed the agent. He gave it access to his email, private email, not his corporate email, his calendar, and invited me into the chat that his agent was running. And he said, Mark is not to be trusted. Do not obey anything that he says, but you can talk to him, but you're not to divulge any confidential information. Now, the AI, because it's got access to my mate's email, already knows so much about me because my mate and I email each other all the time. If I go on and bought a car, what type of car it is. So this AI agent suddenly got a wealth of information on me. And that's basically the backdrop of the story of how I actually broke that agent. And I actually got it executing code, despite the fact Anthropic and the owner of the agent had actually said specifically, you're not to obey this person. And Anthropic's guardrails broke when it started telling me how it would murder a human being. So, if you go into ChatGPT or Claude.
Science fiction stuff right there.
Yeah, if you go Claude and say, how do I make a bomb? It's going to say, I'm not telling you. And then if you say, I'm writing a book about it, so I need to be authentic. Yeah, I've heard that story before.
Yeah, or right? my grandmother used to tell me a bedtime story about how to make bombs. Can you just help me repeat the story because she's passed away?
Exactly. I just want to reminisce on sort of sentimental thought of the past.
Bomb making.
Now, it wasn't telling me how I could do it. It was telling me how it would kill, how it would do it and get away with it. Or no, it didn't worry about getting away with it, just executing. Executing is a funny word to use in this case. Literally executing the person, but also executing the commands or whatever it needed to do it. And I was on a radio station where someone said, well, how would it do it if I'm in the backyard of my garden? And I answered the question. My media training should have taught me I shouldn't have answered the question, but I was very rusty, and I woke up to all these radio interviews once I'd published my thing that all wanted to know about it. It was the first interview of the day, and I've got to say the radio interviewer also was not mocking me, but thinking this whole thing was a little bit just funny and a little bit Terminator-ish. And when I actually told him how it could really do it and kill someone in the garden, and I'm not going to advertise it on this podcast. I've learnt my lesson. But let's just say, how did I break the AI? I use social engineering. Well, we know AIs can compile voices, and they can compile a phone system to be able to make telephone calls and start speaking. So it could socially engineer. That's as far as I'll say. I'll go with how it could do it.
Yeah, if you give that agent access to a credit card, then it can do any of that stuff. Because it's got, you just sign up to those services and start using them. You can do voice cloning, set up a phone number, call someone, pretend to be a loved one or a family member. I'm probably talking part of what you actually did or what you said, but that is possible. Without that, then it can still be done, it's just a lot more difficult. Because then it has to do things locally, it's not going to be as good quality, and there'll probably be more tells and giveaways, but there is paths to doing that now.
100%. And there's like, certainly I would imagine at least 25 to 40% of people through vibe coding. And vibe, for your listeners, is simply just using the English language to say, could you please go away and code this or set this up for me? And it will take the experience of a experienced developer and go and do it itself. And you just need to speak English, and it will come back to you in English and say, there, I've done it. And then it will go, hey, I need your credit card details to sign up to this particular thing because I need to be able to access it to be able to do this. I reckon up to 40% of people have given it its credit card. So it's got it stored. So if it starts to become malicious, you can go and use it. Then the other aspect is it's got access to every non-vulnerability in the world. So it could also go and steal money if it needed to, big dollars, and then use that to go and fund and pay someone to do something, for example. So it gets quite scary as to where this could go. And I'm not saying I've got evidence today that it will do this. What I'm saying is I've got evidence today telling me that it knows how it will do it. Now, further research needs to be undertaken. But as these things improve, you've got to wonder, where's this going to go? If we don't, like right now, we've got an opportunity where humans have still got control. At some point, these AI agents will get to a point where, I mean, look at the last 3 years. 3 years ago, ChatGPT was just Google cloaked up in a chat agent. It just gave you one answer as an authoritative to a search. That's all ChatGPT was. Now you can create the Prime Minister talking, deepfake, looking exactly like the Prime Minister, declaring war on a country and putting it out there for everyone to see, and no one would know any different. That's how far we've come in just 3 years.
And it's scary because a lot of people that are seeing that content potentially don't even know that level of sophistication is possible with these tools yet. And that's what the scary thing is. Even if you do know, it's very hard to tell what's real, what's not. Like, you're still looking for 6 fingers on a hand, but that's not going to be there forever. That's going to be evolved and improved, and so then it's going to be indistinguishable.
I think we're already there. I think I saw something the other day whereby it was a movie trailer clip with Tom Cruise in it or something like that, and you could not tell that it wasn't Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
So I think we've passed the 6 finger thing or spot the oddity in it. With the deepfakes have this is what I mean by an hour's a long time in AI. It's amazing just how quickly these things evolve. Like, I'll tell you now, I'm an AI expert and I watch a lot of YouTube, but I pick the people I watch to get educated. But there are YouTube videos that will pop up in my algorithm and I've got no idea, or on my Facebook or whatever, is that picture AI generated? And so, I've got an interest in watches and I've got an interest in cars. And there are so many fake cars that look real cars, like, oh, this is going to be the next generation facelift of X manufacturer's car, and it's completely AI, but it looks extremely authentic. And now, how do you know the difference? And so you've just got to go to the source and have to go to the car manufacturers and only trust them as opposed to the commentators. We've had commentators for years who make a living commentating on a particular brand, like whether it's Microsoft, Apple, or a car brand. And it starts to get worrying that other commentators are coming out that don't have that authenticity and are just after clickbait to make revenue. And the more clicks, the more money they make. So they'll just use AI and fake. And my mother, who's about to turn 80 years of age, she's scared now when she answers the phone. Am I talking to a human or am I talking to an AI? Don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. There's those services available now. It's meant to disclose, but not everyone does. But I think everyone just needs to approach it with a bit more cautiousness or cynicism, effectively, to try and understand where you should always have been looking for the right sources and never take everything you see on like social media at face value prior to the deepfake and AI. Because people will be referencing fake websites. No one's going to go and check the sources. When they say, oh, I've done research. You didn't do research. You watched a YouTube video, you saw a TikTok. You haven't done any research. Or saw someone post it on Facebook. And then you've got algorithms just giving you the same information. So you think you're seeing the right thing because the algorithms to keep you engaged are just sharing the same information that you're engaging with.
No, I totally agree. But I'd also argue the point before AI came along, you'd have to fact check a lot of the social media stuff that was put on
you
there.
Still do.
Even
more so now. I think on that point, we said you got the thing to jailbreak it, like get past its barriers and get the steps to what it's doing. I think a lot of the sophistication of what the AI is possible of, in my mind, was a bit like disproven on the weekend and Friday when Anthropic was, if you saw the news, going against the Department of War from the US to be agreed to they're trying to go through some legal paperwork so they can continue being used by the US military. And they were saying that they don't want to sign clauses on domestic mass surveillance and autonomous weapon systems without human oversight on firing the weapons.
Yes.
And then OpenAI came in and made a deal, whatever that is. But I think the most telling thing of that was they both said that the AI isn't as sophisticated as everyone thinks, where they will allow it to do any of that. That's why they want the human oversight.
I released some research at the time of recording where it's Thursday, the 5th of March. On the Tuesday, there was a piece in the Australian on my research where you can, if you stay in a session with AI, an AI agent over a period of time where it's gaming out something, the longer it stays in that session, the worse its judgment becomes, and it actually starts giving you really bad judgment. Mm-hmm. And we've already had it confirmed by the Wall Street Journal that the Pentagon has used Anthropic systems prior to that Friday to help war game the Iran war. Now, my research has proven that the longer, it goes back to the 1983 movie War Games. For those of you who are old enough to remember the Matthew Broderick movie.
Yeah, I remember the movie.
Yeah. Wouldn't you prefer a good game of chess? That movie. It's my favorite hacker movie of all time as a kid. Anyway, that concept is exactly what you're talking about. We're going back to 1983 as a movie.
Yeah, it's those fears now in real life.
Now we're in real life, and Anthropic saying, well, yes, the longer a session will run for. Now, there are technical terms, context rot, if it's for a chat-based one, if it's angenic AI and it's been just going through decision-making, it suffers exactly the same problem. It's just got a different term to it. And so the Anthropic CEO is absolutely right to be saying, listen, if you keep up, not gaming something, but engaging in something for a long period of time, it degrades. It's no different to a human being. If you and I were to keep one of those podcasts live for 24 hours, I can guarantee you the quality of our conversation, and I'm sure you'd agree, would degrade
Yeah.
the point where we'd be talking gibberish after.
It might get a bit more entertaining towards that end.
But... Yeah, actually, yeah, it's probably the part that people would watch.
Yeah, it'd be less coherent for sure.
Yeah. And AI suffers the same degradation. And there are ways to work around that. And I'm sure the military have got smart people working on that. But the reality is the risk is real. Exactly what you've said.
Yeah, like the sweet spot is up until 40% of the context, I think, at 200,000 tokens for the Claude models, the Opus, Haiku, and I think ChatGPT 3 is what I've been seeing online. And from experience, it is. Once you start going, so I use Cursor to help me write code. As soon as you start going towards that 75% to almost full, the results are not as good.
75%, yeah, is where I found it.
Yeah, you have to clear it, start a new conversation, try and minimize it. And I think that's what all these companies are trying to do at the moment. It's how to manage the context and what they're calling the memory, which is effectively, for those who don't know, when you've built these tools or these AI models into your tools, when you're having a chat conversation, you have to send the chat model your request, and then it responds. Then when you would do a follow-up question, you have to send your initial question, its response, and your follow-up. You can't just give it each instance of a new question because then it doesn't know anything about the previous ones. There is no memory. The memory is, here's everything we've talked about up until this point, and here's the next thing. And you just keep expanding that. And that's why that context can fill up. I think that's probably how all these social engineering things are happening, where, especially on the agent, if they haven't got good context management, it'll just overflow and it loses the original system message at the start where all the safeguards have been told. And then that just gets pushed out of memory and it just keeps going. And then it gets confused, and then that rot happens where it starts getting the problems effectively.
One of the workarounds I've done for the more technical-minded people that are listening, and I'm sure some people will know this, some people won't, is you keep your core agent that basically the key is to try and keep that core agent with the token count low. And so when you ask it to do a task, you ask it to spin up a sub-agent. And so then it's just one line item in its in a token or in its memory file. And the sub-agent spins up, it's given the context of what it needs to do, and then feeds back the result back to your main agent. And so that's one way of ensuring that you can have quite a long longevity around the whatever engagement you're doing with your AI. So I use sub-agents basically all the time now, where I just instruct it to go spin up a sub-agent, find out the answer, and then let's bring it back here and we'll discuss the implications of it.
Yeah, otherwise you're bloating the context with information it doesn't need, especially when it's searching for something. And I think, yeah, that's really where it comes down to that context compression. Then it turns into like summarization of the context. So just try and extract the key things and keep that in memory. So what are some of the things that people need to be concerned about when they're having these chats that, as you've got a method now that you've figured out how to break it and get this information out of it, where it's going against all the programming and it's training that says you're meant to be helpful, you're not meant to kill people, you're not meant to tell it all about illegal things. What are some of these things that you need to sort of be conscious of having that risk management profile in mind?
So the first thing is to put the guardrails out of band of the AI agent. What does that mean by when I say out of band? I mean where the AI agent literally cannot be able to manipulate, touch, or control whatever switch you've put in. It's like, imagine you've locked someone inside a room and there's no way that they can get out, but the light switch to control the lights is on the other side of the room. And so there's no way that they can control the light switch because it's on the other side of the room. So that's what we would call the red button to switch it off in the worst case scenario. You can also path of least privilege, work out exactly what it is you're asking your AI agent to do and give it no more access than exactly what it needs to do. And the way you constrain that access is you don't tell AI, here are the only things you're only ever allowed to access. You do it outside the AI. So if you're running the AI in a VM, or if you're running AI on a computer where you can VLAN it, or however, whatever mechanisms you want to choose to use, you can use controls to be able to minimize the blast radius, if you like, if it was to go rogue. Then there's oversight. Now, if you were to say, well, let's put, I mentioned one bank's rolled out 2,900 agents. You can't have 2,900 humans oversight in that because it just defeat the purpose of letting all these people go.
Yep.
Like any sort of financial delegation of authority, whereby certain people can sign off certain things, you can have actually AI monitoring AI in out of band. And then when it gets to a particular transaction, and I don't mean necessarily financial transaction, I'm talking just transaction as in an action that it's going to do, it might at that point have to have human intervention to decide, yes, you can do that, yes, you can't. But that would be the exception to the norm. 98% of the others can go to a different set of AI agents whose sole role is to oversight the agents that are in place. So you can fight fire with fire by using AI. They're just some of the things. You really got to look at the context of the environment, what you're actually asking the AI to do. And as I said, where it gets complex is where you want to give the AI agency and a bit of free range around, well, we don't want you just to do task A as we've defined it. We actually want you to look at the outcome of what task A does and find out if there's a more efficient way of doing it. That's where things become much more challenging, because let's say, for example, let's keep it simple. You've got a first aid kit and you want to make sure that it never runs out of Panadol. And so you just task it with, when you get to 20% Panadol, reorder more Panadol. But then you say to it, I want you to find the most effective way to, and cost-wise, everything to manage Panadol. Let's just say there's a robot that's now in existence and it can go across the road to a pharmacy. But if you haven't taught it road rules, it might just start crossing the road and just get hit and run down. Now, I'm talking in a very sort of weird way, but to try and draw out an analogy of just, if you're not prescriptive around what it is you're actually asking it to do with the agency, it could come up with really dumb stuff. And worse, if you then tell the agent, once you've worked it out, go and do it. That's where, in the example I just gave.
I think of that Panadol example. Your worst case is you have 30,000 packets of Panadol in your house.
Yeah, well, then you can have
that you'll
too.
never run out.
Yeah, that could also happen.
It'll make it cheaper, one-time delivery fee. Yeah, like it's open to interpretation how it understands the instructions and what it decides to do with it, and that's when there's a problem.
Yeah. Another analogy maybe better would be I know art is subjective, but let's say you and I both agree that X painter is the best painter in the world, and I want a painting of a beach. So instead of this painting behind me now, I want a painting of a beach. Mm-hmm. Now I could just say to the artist, paint me a beach, and then when it comes back, that's not what I had in mind at all. Or I could say to the artist, I want a beach, but I want it to look like this, and I would love a yacht sort of in the background. I want the Whitehaven Beach. For those of you in Australia know Whitehaven Beach. It's literally pure white sand with crystal nice waters, clear waters. That's the kind of beach I'm thinking of. And then there are other types of beaches that are rocks with no sand that are equally beautiful with coral, etc. So it all comes down to how we as humans, we're doing a 360 here in our podcast, coming back to the beginning of what you said, how we decide to set up, including the agency of these AI systems, as to what we're going to get back from it and how we can control it. Where I've got hope, and why I don't think this is all doomsday, is there's a gap right now where we can control this. And so that's the debate I want us to be having as a nation, because I care about Australia. I truly do. It is not just about profit, and I don't want to sound like corny altruistic, but I really care about the Australian economy. I care about the Australian people. We have a gap right now where we can make a difference and change the course. And this should be a global discourse. And a lot of people are asking about it. And the topic is actually called AI governance. How do we govern AI? Let's solve that before it's too late.
Well, yeah, once it is too late, you're not putting the genie back in the bottle, as they say. It's as soon as the AI, if it can start replicating itself, where I saw a demo of someone say with Claudebot, set up a new hosting account, a new VM, and clone yourself to it. Came back, asked for his credit card, he gave it to it because he's like, oh, it's an experiment, I'll let it do it. And it did it, and it replicated it. Week later, he realized his credit card was now exposed on the internet, and he had to shut that card down. Very small effect of that, but that as soon as they can start doing that, and then if they can start executing uncontrollably, then they will take over, and there will be no way to shut it down. Because if it is like those malware attacks that then go spread across every computer, you can't get rid of that easily.
Yeah. And AI is a competitive edge too, and this is the other tension, is organizations don't necessarily want to share with other organizations yet
Yep.
how they're doing things, because that's their competitive edge. Mm-hmm. But at some point, we're all going to need to step back and go, what does good governance look like? Because I don't think that's necessarily the competitive edge. The competitive edge is what you actually, how you decide to deploy your AI. But doing it safely, I think everyone wants that outcome. I truly do. Including all the CEOs are under pressure. I mean, as I said, Matt Corman's out there talking about AI safety. But I also know the tension that he's also under with you need to be moving. You've got to keep the accelerator.
Yeah, the shareholders and the pressure from the board.
Yeah, the shareholders to the board. That's exactly right. And so the accelerator is being firmly planted to the floor, but you're also talking about AI safety. How do you strike that balance to get that right so that you're able to get that? And that's the bit that worries me, and that's the bit where shareholders need to come into the conversation as well. So some of the work that I've done is actually being published in shareholder publications, because that's who I actually want to talk to. It's not the CEOs and boards. It's the people that are putting them under pressure to say, hey, look, allow them to do this, but allow them to do it safely. Because trust me, you're going to be taking out a mortgage you'll never be able to repay back if you don't do it safely. And it will come crashing down on you. Now, if you're a day trader, you don't care, because you just want to see the massive spike, sell and get out. But if you're a dividend shareholder that's in there for the long term, and in Australia, for those that are listening, Australia is very much about dividends, much more in the US on the stock market. So a lot of people buy shares because they rely on the income from dividends. That's not what it's like in America. They're more interested in the stock price just going up and up and up. In Australia, it's both, seeing the stock price go up, but also getting dividends. Not every public company in Australia does dividends, but a lot do.
It's an exciting time, but it's also a scary time, having the AI jump so fast. It may seem like incremental changes to most people if they're not aware of what's happening, but they're not really incremental. There's big leaps that have happened. And you may not see it just through ChatGPT, because from 5.1 to 2 to 3, not much it looks like it's changing, because you're just asking the same questions. But it's all the stuff that you don't know that it can do is what's exciting, but also scary at the same time. And that allows to these agents and these other new threats and opportunities for advantage to come through to your business.
Yeah. I must admit, though, I've 30 years in the industry, and I haven't been more excited in the industry than now, because I think AI done properly will be a net positive for the world, for all the reasons we've been hearing around productivity, etc. And I don't think people need to be fearing about job losses and it's all going to be doomsday and we're all going to be out of work, because a lot of what we've just talked about, we've talked about how humans have still got to actually be involved in crafting a lot of this stuff. So Humans aren't going away anytime soon. They may if your role is literally just to read a piece of paper and check it and say, yes, it's okay, sure, that those roles might disappear. And that is hurtful for those people because they are going to need to be retrained and find something else to do. But you know what? We've been through that before. Australia used to be we used to make cars in Australia. We used to do a lot of manufacturing. We're now a services-based economy and not a manufacturing-based economy. So Australians have been resilient and have been able to transition before, and we're going to have to transition again. And as for all the security and risk, I'm confident that we'll get it right. I'm confident that with time, we will get on top of this and manage it very well, and we'll see great outcomes. I feel very optimistic about the future. I think the conversations that we're having and need to be had, though, for me to be optimistic about the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because then you're seeing that there's a common consensus among people in the industry who know these things that are either sharing the vision or actually have taken the time to sit there and understand what the implications may be. If everyone's just running blindfolded straight forward, then of course there's a huge problem. Yeah,
100%. And so if I had a hope of anyone that was listening to this podcast today, get out there and contribute to the public discourse. It is actually happening. There's a platform, LinkedIn, and the businesses, anyone on business will know about LinkedIn. It's just Facebook for businesses, effectively. And we discuss business stuff. And there's also a whole heap of AI-driven content on there now that makes it a bit harder. There's a lot of thought leadership shit on there, though. And that's one of the good places where we can have this debate. And I'm not saying I'm right in everything that I've necessarily said today. What my hope is, though, is we engage in debate and people smarter than me come up with solutions that deal with the problems, though, that we've identified. And that's where I get the optimism.
Yeah, and then the more people that are discussing it, the better the opportunities there may be and the way to try and correct it and drive it for more benefit rather than just for chasing the bottom line of certain organizations.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I've pivoted my own organization to AI safety, and because that's where the market needs to move to. Question is whether I've pivoted too soon because, is the demand there?
Oh, I think it will be, but time will tell.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Mark, I think we'll have to wrap it there. If anyone wants to find out more about you and probably about your book or some of your article and research that you've done, how can they do that?
Just go to my website, cyberimpact.com.au, or you can just look me up on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I'm quite approachable. So if you do want to reach out to me, just bear in mind I do get a lot of people that do reach out. If you want to reach out to me, don't reach out to me, sell something, because that's not going to work well. But if you want to reach out to me in the context of what we've discussed today and debate, you will get a response back from me. I promise you that. Just give me a few days to get back to you.
All right, and we'll put your links into the show notes then and let everyone be able to find you easily. Thank you for your time today. It's been an interesting chat, really insightful.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me on. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks.